Yesterday, she lay on a warm rug, curled up by the fireplace, listening to the sweet laughter of her little owner. Tiny hands stroked her golden fur, whispering words of love. Today, the snow falls bitterly. The fading sunlight casts long shadows over the empty road. A tattered cardboard box sits abandoned on the frozen pavement. Inside, 3 tiny puppies huddle together, shivering, seeking warmth that no longer exists. A few steps away, their mother stands motionless. Her breath hangs in the frigid air, her body trembling, her wide, desperate eyes fixed on the road ahead. She doesn't understand what happened. She cannot go back. But she cannot leave either. The winter morning was bitterly cold, the sky a pale grey as heavy clouds loomed over the endless stretch of highway. Snow covered everything in sight, blanketing the frozen asphalt, clinging to the bare branches of trees, and swirling in the frigid wind like tiny shards of ice. A dark-coloured vehicle pulled over to the side of the road. Its tyres crunched against the packed snow, leaving deep impressions that would soon be erased by the relentless wind. For a moment, there was silence. Then the car door swung open. A battered cardboard box was shoved out onto the frozen pavement. It landed with a dull thud, tipping slightly before settling into the snow. Inside, a golden retriever mother lay curled around her 3 tiny puppies, her body trembling as she instinctively pulled them closer. The puppies, barely weeks old, let out faint whimpers, their fragile bodies wriggling in confusion. They had yet to fully open their eyes, unaware of the cruel fate unfolding around them. The wind howled as the vehicle's tires spun against the ice. Without hesitation, the driver slammed the door shut and sped away, the engine roaring as the car disappeared into the distance. The golden retriever's ears perked up, her heart pounding. She tried to move, tried to chase after the only world she had ever known, but her body refused to leave the box. Her instinct screamed at her. Her puppies needed her warmth. The cold was merciless, seeping into her bones, tightening its icy grip around her limbs. Why? She didn't understand. Just yesterday she had been lying by a crackling fireplace, feeling the gentle touch of small hands stroking her fur. The soft giggles of Emma, her 5-year-old owner, had filled the air as the child had whispered sweet words to her. "You're my best girl, Princess. You and your babies are safe with me." But now she was here, thrown away like trash. The cardboard box barely provided any protection against the freezing wind. Snowflakes swirled inside, settling on the trembling bodies of the puppies. The mother lowered her head, licking them gently, trying to keep them warm. Her golden fur was already speckled with frost, her breath forming desperate, misty puffs in the freezing air. She had no choice but to endure, for them. A silent plea for mercy. Hours passed. The snowfall thickened. The mother dog pressed her body closer to her pups, wrapping around them as best she could. Her own body ached from the biting cold, but she couldn't let them suffer. The puppies whimpered softly, their tiny paws twitching. They were too weak to move much, and their cries were growing fainter. She let out a low, mournful whimper. Would no one stop? Would no one see them? The occasional car sped past in a blur of headlights, their tires kicking up slush. Some slowed slightly as they passed the box, but none stopped. The mother dog didn't understand. Humans were kind, weren't they? At least that was what she had always believed. But now, as she sat abandoned in the snow, she wasn't so sure anymore. Her body shivered uncontrollably. She had lost feeling in her paws. The only warmth left in her was whatever she could offer to her pups. Still, she refused to close her eyes. She couldn't give up. Not yet. The thunder of an approaching giant. The wind howled, carrying with it the distant growl of an approaching vehicle. At first it was just a low hum, barely distinguishable from the roar of the storm, but within seconds it grew louder, a deep, mechanical thunder that sent vibrations through the frozen ground. The mother dog lifted her head, her ears twitched, straining to locate the source of the noise. Then she saw it, a massive semi-truck. It was barreling down the highway, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. The enormous grille loomed like the maw of some great beast, devouring the distance between them in seconds. The mother dog's heart lurched. The box. They were in the middle of the road. Her puppies, so small, so helpless, lay directly in the path of the oncoming truck. Adrenaline surged through her weak limbs. She forced herself to stand, her legs shaking violently. She could barely move, barely breathe, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had to protect them. With every ounce of strength left in her body, she stepped in front of the box, standing between her children and the oncoming truck. The headlights bore down on them, blinding. The truck was not slowing down. Her breath hitched. There was no time. She stood her ground, golden fur billowing in the icy wind, eyes wide with determination, and then the deafening blast of a truck horn filled the air. The blinding glare of the truck's headlights illuminated the snow-covered road, casting long shadows as the massive vehicle barreled forward. The freezing wind howled, carrying with it the sharp, ear-splitting blast of the truck's horn. Jack Turner's pulse spiked. From behind the wheel, he caught sight of a shape in the middle of the road. Something small, unmoving, half buried in the swirling snow. His instincts kicked in before his brain fully registered the danger. Slamming his foot on the brake, Jack felt the truck lurch forward, tires screeching as they skidded across the icy pavement. The anti-lock braking system fought to keep the vehicle from jackknifing, but momentum carried the massive rig forward, sliding uncontrollably. The world seemed to slow. Jack gritted his teeth, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands. The truck shuddered violently, tires slipping against the slick road. For one horrifying second, he thought he wouldn't be able to stop in time. Then, finally, the truck came to a jarring halt, just a few feet away from the motionless figure. Jack didn't hesitate. Throwing open the door, he jumped down from the cab, boots crunching into the thick snow. His breath came out in quick, visible bursts as he hurried forward, eyes scanning the road. What the hell is that? A pile of trash? A lost coat? No. As he moved closer, his stomach twisted. It was a dog. A golden retriever, her golden fur barely visible beneath a layer of frost. Her body trembled violently, legs unsteady as she stood in front of a battered cardboard box. Jack's breath hitched. The box was moving. His heart pounded in his chest as he dropped to his knees. Inside the box, 3 tiny puppies curled together, barely moving, their little bodies trembling from the cold. He swallowed hard. Oh, hell! The mother dog lifted her head slightly, her eyes locking onto his. Despite her weakness, there was something in her gaze, something fierce, something unwavering. She was protecting them. Even now, as she stood on the brink of collapse, she was shielding them from the storm. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He had seen a lot of things in his years on the road. Accidents, collisions, stray animals barely clinging to life. But this broke something inside him. A race against time. A gust of wind blew, sending another wave of snow cascading over the tiny family. The mother dog swayed, her legs finally giving out. Jack lunged forward, catching her before she collapsed completely. She wasn't just cold. She was barely alive. Her breath was shallow, uneven. Damn it! His eyes darted to the puppies. They were still breathing, but just barely. They wouldn't last much longer out here. Jack hesitated for only a fraction of a second before making his decision. He needed to get them out of the cold, now. Ignoring the biting wind, he reached down and carefully lifted the cardboard box, cradling the shivering puppies against his chest. They let out faint whimpers, their tiny bodies pressing into the warmth of his jacket. Then, with the mother dog still unconscious in his arms, he turned and ran back toward the truck. Shelter from the storm. Jack climbed back into the cab, quickly shutting the door behind him to block out the howling wind. The warmth inside the truck immediately hit his frozen skin. but his focus remained on the fragile lives in his arms. He placed the box onto the passenger seat and unzipped his thick winter coat, tucking the 3 tiny puppies against his chest for warmth. They barely reacted, their little bodies too weak to do more than shiver. Next, he looked at the mother dog. She was still breathing, but only just. She needed heat, fast. Without hesitation, Jack grabbed an old fleece blanket from behind his seat and wrapped it around her. Then he cranked up the heater, turning the vents toward them. For a few agonizing minutes, he sat there, rubbing gentle circles over the mother dog's frostbitten fur, willing warmth back into her body. Slowly, painfully slowly, her chest began to rise and fall in steadier motions. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You're gonna be all right, girl." The puppies let out soft, pitiful cries, pressing deeper into his coat. Jack could feel their tiny heartbeats fluttering rapidly against his chest. He knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just leave them. These dogs had been thrown away like garbage, left to freeze to death with no second thought. But Jack wouldn't let that be the end of their story. He reached for his phone, his fingers still numb from the cold, and dialed the one person he knew would understand. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Jack, what's going on?" Jack glanced down at the 3 tiny lives curled up in his coat, then at the mother dog, still unconscious but safe for now. "Maggie," he said, voice steady, "I need your help." The hum of the engine filled the cabin as Jack pressed the accelerator, his hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. His heart pounded, not from the road ahead, but from the fragile lives huddled beside him. The mother dog was barely holding on. The puppies, nestled against the warmth of his chest, stirred weakly, their small whimpers piercing through the quiet of the truck. But the mother hadn't moved since he wrapped her in the fleece blanket. Jack kept glancing at her, his jaw clenched. "Just hold on a little longer, girl." The highway stretched endlessly before him, the snow reflecting the dim light of the early evening. He had to reach shelter. A race against time. Up ahead, a roadside rest stop appeared, a small, dimly lit building with a diner and a lounge for weary travelers. Most importantly, it had a fireplace. Jack pulled into the nearly empty parking lot and killed the engine. Without hesitation, he grabbed the cardboard box with the puppies, cradling them protectively, and then carefully lifted the mother dog. She was lighter than she should have been, too still in his arms. His boots crunched against the icy pavement as he hurried inside. The warmth of the rest stop hit him immediately, a sharp contrast to the bitter cold outside. The fireplace flickered invitingly in the corner, its glow casting shadows across the wooden floor. A few truckers sat at the bar, sipping coffee, their eyes flickering toward him as he entered, arms full. But Jack didn't stop. He made his way straight to the fireplace, dropping to his knees as he set the box down gently. The puppies let out soft, pitiful cries, their little bodies still trembling. Jack immediately shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped them in it, pulling them closer to the fire. Then he turned to the mother. She still hadn't moved, his stomach twisted. A mother's last strength. Jack carefully unwrapped the fleece, exposing her fragile body to the warmth. The moment the blanket fell away, she let out a shuddering breath, her muscles trembling from the sudden change in temperature. Then, to his astonishment, she tried to move. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her head. Jack watched in silence, his throat tightening as the mother dog dragged herself forward inch by inch until she reached the box. She was dying. He could see it in her glassy eyes, in the way her ribs shuddered with every breath. And yet, she still had one last thing to do. With the last of her strength, she began licking her puppies, gently nudging them closer, her tongue weak but full of love. One of the puppies stirred, letting out a tiny yawn, pressing into her warmth. A small, exhausted sigh escaped her lips. And then she stilled. Her breathing slowed. Jack's hands instinctively reached out, pressing against her chest. Nothing. The fire crackled softly, casting a golden glow over the peaceful expression on her face. She had done everything she could. She had used her own body to shield them from the cold, to protect them until help arrived, and now she was gone. Jack swallowed hard. Too late. For a long moment, Jack didn't move. He had seen death before. It wasn't new. The road had shown him enough of it. Accidents, tragedies, lives lost in an instant. But this was different. Because she hadn't died for herself. She had died for them. Jack exhaled shakily, running a rough hand over his face. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her fur, soft, still warm, but unmoving. The puppies let out soft whimpers. One of them crawled toward its mother, nudging her lifeless body with a tiny paw. Jack's chest ached. They didn't understand. They were too young. To them, she was still warmth, still safety. Jack hesitated for only a moment before carefully lifting her, pressing his forehead against her cold fur for a second, just a second, before setting her down beside the fire. "I'm sorry, girl." He pulled the puppies closer, wrapping them in his coat, shielding them from the sight of their mother's still form. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Jack sat there, watching the flames dance, knowing that this moment would stay with him forever. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the truck's headlights cutting through the thick curtain of falling snow. Jack's hands tightened around the wheel, his mind still replaying the last moments of the mother dog, her final breath, the way she had nudged her puppies before slipping away. He had seen a lot of things on the road, but nothing like this. The tiny, fragile puppies now slept inside a blanket on the passenger seat, their small bodies rising and falling with each breath. The warmth from the heater had stopped their shivering, but every now and then one would whimper softly, as if calling out for their mother. Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "They've lost enough tonight. I won't let them lose anything else." Homecoming. The Turner home sat on the outskirts of town, a modest but welcoming house with a wraparound porch and a warm glow from the windows. The scent of burning wood lingered in the air. Maggie must have started the fireplace. Jack pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. For a moment, he just sat there. The storm raged outside, but inside the truck there was only silence. Then he exhaled, grabbing the bundle of puppies and stepping out into the cold. Before he even reached the door, it swung open. Maggie stood there, her auburn hair tied back, wearing an oversized sweater. The moment she saw what Jack was carrying, her expression shifted from confusion to deep concern. "Jack." "Found them on the highway," Jack murmured, stepping inside, closing the door behind him. The warmth of the house immediately wrapped around them. "Mother didn't make it." Maggie pressed a hand to her mouth. Her eyes softened. "Oh, those poor babies." She reached for the bundle, carefully lifting one of the puppies, cradling it against her chest. The tiny creature barely stirred, only letting out a faint sigh of warmth. "They're weak, but alive," Jack said, his voice quieter now. "You think you can help?" Maggie nodded instantly. "Let's get them warm first, then I'll check them over." A strange discovery. Maggie set up a small makeshift bed near the fireplace, laying down fresh blankets before carefully placing the puppies inside. They stirred slightly, their tiny bodies curling into the warmth. She worked quickly, methodically, checking their paws for frostbite, their bellies for any signs of malnourishment. Jack watched in silence. He had always admired Maggie's ability to care for the helpless. Maybe that's why they had ended up together, because she healed and he protected. As she ran her hands gently along one of the puppies' necks, she suddenly stopped. Jack caught the subtle change in her posture. "What is it?" he asked. Maggie frowned, fingers tracing something small, metallic, a collar. She lifted the puppy slightly, turning it so Jack could see. Around its tiny neck was a thin silver band, barely visible beneath its fluffy fur. Jack stepped closer. It wasn't just a collar. It had something engraved on it. Maggie leaned in, squinting. "It's a letter," she murmured. "An initial." She gently pulled back the fur of another puppy, another collar, another engraved letter. She checked the third. Same thing. 3 silver collars, 3 different letters. Jack's brows furrowed. That wasn't normal. Most stray or abandoned puppies didn't wear collars at all, especially not ones like these. "This doesn't make sense," Jack muttered, crossing his arms. "Why would someone dump them like trash if they cared enough to give them engraved collars?" Maggie looked just as puzzled. "Jack, I don't think these were just any dogs. I think someone really loved them." Jack's stomach twisted. He had assumed the worst, that the puppies had been tossed away by some heartless owner who didn't want them, but now, he wasn't so sure. Searching for answers. After Maggie had finished checking the puppies, confirming they were weak but otherwise unharmed, Jack sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. He needed answers. The coffee in front of him had gone cold. The puppies had fallen asleep in their warm little nest. Maggie sat across from him, looking equally deep in thought. Jack opened his browser and typed, "Missing golden retriever puppies in Winterdale area." Nothing. He tried again. "Lost golden retriever litter. Reward?" Still nothing. Frowning, he checked local Facebook groups, scrolling through missing pet posts. Most were for lost cats or the occasional runaway dog. But no one had reported a missing golden retriever mother with 3 puppies. Jack exhaled. This didn't feel right. Someone had cared about these dogs, deeply. The collars, the engraved initials, it all pointed to an owner who had loved them. So why had they been left to die? Maggie's voice broke the silence. "Jack," he looked up. Her expression had changed, a flicker of realization in her eyes. "What if," she said carefully, "whoever loved them doesn't know they're missing?" Jack's gaze sharpened. It was a chilling thought. Maybe this wasn't just a case of someone abandoning their pets. Maybe this was something much, much worse. A week had passed since Jack had found the puppies. The storm had long since cleared, leaving behind crisp, icy mornings and golden winter sunsets. Inside the Turner household, the warmth of the fireplace and the soft sound of puppy paws against the wooden floor had brought a strange kind of comfort, a stark contrast to how the pups had been found, trembling and alone in the snow. Under Maggie's care, the 3 little ones had grown stronger. They ate eagerly, played clumsily, and nuzzled into Jack's lap as if he had always been their protector. Yet despite the growing bond, one question lingered. Who had abandoned them? Jack had spent hours searching online, checking missing pet reports, contacting local shelters. No one had come forward. No one had even mentioned a lost golden retriever mother and her puppies. Until now. A shocking discovery. It happened by accident. Maggie had been scrolling through her phone while sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly sipping her coffee. The puppies were curled up beside her, their soft breaths rising and falling in unison. Then, suddenly, she froze. Jack, who had been in the kitchen, noticed the shift. "What is it?" he asked, already standing. Maggie's voice was quiet but urgent. "You need to see this." She turned the phone toward him. "Urgent search. Missing golden retriever mother and 3 puppies from Winterdale Estate. 5-year-old Emma devastated." Jack's stomach dropped. Beneath the post was a photo, a little girl, no older than 5, clutching a golden retriever in her arms. Tears streaked the child's cheeks, her small fingers gripping the dog as if letting go would break her. Jack felt the air leave his lungs. He knew that dog. He had held her as she took her last breath. "No!" His hand tightened around the phone as he stared at the familiar golden fur, the kind, intelligent eyes. There was no doubt. The mother dog he had found dying in the snow, the one who had sacrificed herself for her puppies, belonged to this little girl. A puzzle that didn't fit. Jack exhaled slowly, trying to steady the anger rising in his chest. A family this wealthy? A child who clearly loved her dog? Why in God's name had they been left to die on a highway? None of it made sense. If they had run away, someone would have looked for them sooner. The mother dog was well cared for, strong, healthy before the cold had drained her life away. This wasn't a case of carelessness. This felt like something else. Maggie's expression mirrored his. "This doesn't add up," she said, voicing exactly what he was thinking. Why did it take them a week to make this public? And why were they found so far from Winterdale? Jack's jaw tightened. Because someone didn't want them to be found. He didn't say it aloud, not yet. Instead, he scrolled through the post's comments. Hundreds of people sharing, offering prayers, asking for updates, but no clues. Then his eyes caught something, a detail he had overlooked. The post wasn't made by the parents. It was made by one of their staff, a housekeeper. The first thread unraveled. Jack stared at the name. Claire Reynolds. Not the mother, not the father. Someone who worked for the family. He turned to Maggie, his expression hardening. Something's off. If my dog and her puppies were missing, I'd be raising hell, not waiting a week for someone else to post about it. Maggie frowned. So what do we do? Jack didn't hesitate. We find out the truth. Jack's truck rumbled down the long, winding road leading to Winterdale Estate. Snow dusted the towering iron gates, which stood like silent sentinels guarding the sprawling mansion beyond. Jack had seen plenty of wealth in his life, but something about this place felt hollow. He pulled to a stop, cutting the engine. In the passenger seat, 3 tiny puppies stirred, nestled in the warmth of an old blanket. One let out a soft whimper, as if sensing what was to come. Jack exhaled, then stepped out, lifting the box carefully. Today, he would return them home. But it wouldn't be a happy reunion. Not entirely. Tears and silence. The moment the front door opened, a small figure rushed forward. "Theo! Daisy! Lucky!" The little girl's voice pierced the cold air like a fragile thread of hope. Emma. Jack barely had time to kneel before the 5-year-old threw herself onto the box, sobbing. She buried her face in the soft golden fur, whispering their names over and over. The puppies, startled at first, recognized her scent instantly. Tiny tails wagged weakly. For the first time in days, they didn't seem lost. Behind Emma, her parents stood frozen in the doorway. Jack met their gazes, shock, disbelief, confusion. No one spoke. Then Emma lifted her tear-streaked face and asked the question Jack had been dreading. "Where's Mummy?" The world seemed to hold its breath. Jack's grip tightened on the box. He had stared down the barrel of a loaded gun before. He had pulled people from twisted metal wreckage, but nothing had ever felt harder than this moment. He swallowed. Then, with quiet certainty, he answered. "Your mummy was very brave, sweetheart." Emma sniffled, blinking up at him. Jack forced himself to keep his voice steady. "She did everything she could to protect them." Silence. Emma's lower lip trembled. She looked at the puppies, then back at Jack. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Jack expected more tears, a breakdown. Instead, she did something that shattered him completely. She reached down, carefully picked up the smallest puppy, and held it close to her heart. And then, in the quietest whisper, she said, "It's okay, Mommy. I'll take care of them now." Jack turned away, blinking rapidly against the sudden sting in his eyes. A truth that shouldn't exist. Behind Emma, her parents still hadn't moved. Jack stood to face them. "She wasn't abandoned," he said, his voice harder now. "She didn't run away." Emma's mother, a woman with weary eyes and trembling hands, let out a shaky breath. We never thought—" Her voice broke. Jack narrowed his eyes. "You never thought what?" Emma's father stepped forward, his face pale. "We never abandoned them." Jack's heartbeat slowed. "What did you say?" "We never gave them away," the man repeated. We thought they were safe. Here. In our home." Jack's entire body went rigid. A bitter chill swept through him that had nothing to do with the winter air. If the family never abandoned the dogs, then who did? A name that should have been forgotten. No. Jack had spent enough time on the road to know when someone was lying. But these people, they weren't lying. They were terrified. Jack set the box down carefully and crossed his arms. "You better start explaining," he said evenly. The father rubbed a hand over his face. "We had a housekeeper, Victor." Jack said nothing, waiting. Emma's mother let out a shaky breath. "We fired him," she whispered. Jack's jaw tightened. "Why?" The father hesitated, then muttered, "He stole from us." Jack exhaled sharply. Of course, Maggie had been right. No one waited a week to report their beloved dogs missing unless something was wrong. Jack could see it now. Victor, bitter and angry, knowing he was about to be thrown out, knowing he had nothing left to lose. And in his final act of spite, he had taken something precious from this family. He had driven out into the night, and he had left them to die. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the cold morning air. Victor kept his head down, his expression unreadable, as two officers escorted him toward the waiting squad car. Snow crunched beneath their boots, the blue and red lights of the police vehicle flashing against the pale winter sky. Jack stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. It had taken days of digging, police reports and witness statements, but justice had finally come knocking. "Victor Pearson," the sheriff's voice was firm, unreadable. "You are under arrest for theft, animal cruelty, and reckless endangerment. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Jack didn't bother listening to the rest. His gaze shifted toward the front steps of the Winterdale estate, where Emma clung tightly to her mother's side. Even from a distance, Jack could see the way she hugged the puppies against her chest, her tiny fingers tangled in their golden fur. Tears glistened on her cheeks, but she wasn't sobbing anymore. She was holding on. And for a little girl who had lost so much, that meant everything. A name to remember. Inside the mansion, the warmth of the fireplace chased away the lingering chill from outside. Jack and Maggie sat in the grand living room, cups of hot cocoa resting on the polished wooden table in front of them. Emma hadn't let go of the puppies since they'd come back. She sat cross-legged on the floor, stroking their fur with soft, careful hands. Her father knelt beside her, speaking gently. "We need to name them properly," he said. "They're safe now. They're home." Emma nodded, her small fingers grazing the engraved silver collars still around their necks. Then, after a long moment, she pointed to the smallest one, the one who had clung to her the most. "I want to call her Princess." Jack felt something in his chest tighten. Emma looked up, blinking at him. "That was Mummy's name. She kept us safe. So now she'll always be with us." Jack glanced at Maggie. She didn't speak, but her eyes mirrored his emotions perfectly. No one had told Emma to choose that name, but somehow she had known. Somehow she had felt it. A Christmas of second chances. The snow fell softly outside, but inside everything was warm. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the house, mixing with the gentle crackle of the fireplace. It was Christmas Eve. Jack and Maggie had planned to head home, but Emma's parents insisted they stay. "You saved them," Emma's mother had said, her voice thick with gratitude. "You saved all of us." And so Jack found himself sitting on the couch, a plate of homemade pie in front of him, watching as Emma played with her new family members. The puppies had recovered well, Theo, Daisy, and now Princess. They tumbled over each other, tiny tails wagging, paws slipping on the smooth wooden floor. For the first time since that fateful night, they looked truly happy. Jack leaned back, exhaling slowly. For days, the weight of what had happened had sat heavy in his chest. The bitter anger at how cruel people could be, the pain of watching an innocent creature give everything she had for her children. But now he could see that her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. They had a home, They had love, and they would never be abandoned again. Maggie nudged him gently. "That's the first real smile I've seen from you in a while, Turner." Jack huffed a small laugh. "Guess I finally believe in Christmas miracles." Maggie smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in quiet peace. And though Princess was gone, her love, her sacrifice, would never be forgotten. Life is full of pain and loss, but it is also full of love and second chances. This mother dog gave everything she had, shielding her puppies from the cold, refusing to abandon them, even when the world had abandoned her. Her love was unconditional, selfless, the kind of love that reminds us of what truly matters. And though she is gone, her story did not end in the snow, because kindness found its way to them, because one man stopped when no one else did, because a little girl refused to let love fade away. This is what we are meant to do, to care for those who cannot speak for themselves, to stand up for the innocent, to be the warmth in someone else's winter. If this story has touched your heart, please share it, because somewhere out there another soul needs rescuing. Maybe you are the one meant to find them. Have you ever witnessed an act of pure love and sacrifice like this? Tell us in the comments below. Your words might inspire someone to show kindness today. And as always, may God bless you for your compassion, for your heart, and for believing in the goodness still left in this world. God bless you all.